Why do we need democracy movements when the U.S. Constitution already guarantees a government of, by, and for we, the people? Because that's the ideal for which we strive, not the reality we have. Instead, we face powerful corporations who wield their extensive wealth to direct policies that put profits before people. We need democracy movements because we need democracy, and we need Move to Amend because it is the only grassroots people's movement dedicated to eradicating the roots of corporate power that is so aggressively undermining the will of the people. How did corporations gain so much power? It was not by the consent of the people, but through the Supreme Court. For more than a century, this unelected body has recognized these artificial entities as people. Accordingly, it has ceded to corporations many of our, as we the people, constitutional rights. While running for president in 2011, Mitt Romney tried to explain why it made sense for corporations to have constitutional rights.
Corporations!
Corporations are people, my friend.
No,
We can raise
not.
taxes. Of course they are. Everything corporations earn ultimately goes to people. So, where do you think it goes?
Oh, it goes in their pocket! Goes in their pocket!
The crowd rejected this bogus notion, and so have more than 500,000 real people from across the country who have signed in support of Move to Amend's We the People Amendment. The We the People Amendment, sponsored by Representative Pramila Jayapal, states that 1. Corporations are not people, and 2. Money is not speech. The We the People Amendment is essential to the future of our country. In a democracy, the people are at the helm of government. We should be the ones writing laws to govern corporations. Instead, corporations, claiming constitutional personhood, are writing laws to govern us. To make sense of this lunatic logic, we need to look back at our history. The U.S. Constitution, ratified in 1789, recognized less than 10% of the population as citizens guaranteed full constitutional rights. It took another 2 years of people's protest for Congress to agree to the Bill of Rights, the first 10 amendments to the Constitution. Thus, people securing rights through amendments to the Constitution was established early in the Republic. As historian Howard Zinn argued, whatever freedoms we have in the United States, of speech, of the press, of assembly, and more, do not come simply from the existence on paper of the first 10 amendments to the Constitution, but from the struggles of citizens to bring those amendments alive in reality. The end of the Civil War created a unique space for those struggles, which culminated in the addition of 3 amendments. These were the 13th, the 15th, and in between, the 14th Amendment. With its guarantees of due process, the 14th Amendment attracted the attention of corporations. It soon provided the linchpin for them to claim constitutional personhood. Within 20 years of the 14th Amendment's passage, the Southern Pacific Railroad, one of the largest corporations in the country, took Santa Clara County in California to court over a tax dispute. Basing its case on the 14th Amendment, the railroad claimed its right to due process protections as stated in the U.S. Constitution. Losing in the lower courts, it used its massive wealth to take the case to the Supreme Court. There, in 1886, it at last won, though not based on its claims for 14th Amendment protections. The justices rejected that argument because, of course, corporations are not people. Nevertheless, corporate lawyers have since falsely represented the favorable ruling as the Supreme Court's recognition that corporations had constitutional personhood rights. It was not true, but with the vast wealth and power of the railroad barons behind it, the lie became the truth. From the very start, the consequences of the Southern Pacific Railroad versus Santa Clara County case were devastating for the people. Years later, in 1938, Justice Hugo Black calculated the devastation. Black wrote that of the cases in this court in which the 14th Amendment was applied during the first 50 years, less than 1/2 of 1% invoked it in protection of the Negro race, and more than 50% asked that its benefits be extended to corporations. Mind you, this was during the Jim Crow and Gilded Age era. Over the decades, the Supreme Court has granted corporations additional constitutional rights under the Fourth and Fifth Amendments and under the First Amendment. Based on First Amendment rights guaranteeing free speech, the Supreme Court has declared that money is speech. Money is how corporations speak. The most well-known of these is the 2010 Citizens United versus the Federal Election Commission decision that removed most limits on PAC contributions in elections. As we have witnessed since, whoever or whatever has more money has more speech, and therefore greater influence to determine election outcomes. So much for the level playing field required for a thriving democracy. The consequences of these disastrous Supreme Court rulings are keenly felt in Central Ohio. Corporations push government policies to privatize schools, prisons, and health care. They savage safety nets and ravage regulations designed to protect the environment. They back laws that ensure low wages, a gig economy, and the lack of employment benefits, all the while insisting on tax breaks for developers, public financing for privately owned stadiums, and legislation to restrict citizen opposition. But it doesn't have to be this way. Americans can unite behind a constitutional amendment to abolish the concept that corporations are people and money is speech. Standing up for democracy, we can and we must declare that human rights are for human beings alone. We need a democracy movement that will help topple corporate rule that puts profits before people. Support Move to Amend's We the People Amendment that declares that corporations are not people and money is not speech. While this amendment may put a strain on megacorporations, at least those who survive on tax breaks, bailouts, and other laws they have engineered in their favor, Move to Amend's We the People Amendment will also pave the way for a government of, by, and for we the people. The long struggle shared by many in Central Ohio to make democracy a reality in this country is the reason that Representative Pramila Jayapal introduced the We the People Amendment in Congress, and why more than 70 of her colleagues have signed on as co-sponsors. In conclusion, Move to Amend Central Ohio presents Representative Jayapal's endorsement of the We the People Amendment.
Hi, I'm Congresswoman Pramila Jayapal, and I'm proud to represent Washington's 7th Congressional District and also to serve as the co-chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus. I'm also proud to announce that I will be leading the House Joint Resolution 48, the Move to Amend resolution in the 116th Congress. This bipartisan resolution will amend our Constitution to say that only people and not corporations can have constitutional rights. Our Constitution says we the people, not we the corporations. When corporations have constitutional rights, our own rights become meaningless. The Supreme Court has ruled that money equals free speech. People who have money can speak, and people who don't can't. It's hard to beat back against these moneyed interests to make our voices heard, and it's unjust that we should even have to. We didn't stand for that sort of plutocracy in 1776, and we won't stand for it now. I believe our democratic values are worth more than any amount of money a corporation can pay, and the American people believe that too. 88% of Americans want to reduce the influence that large campaign donors wield over lawmakers, and this is an idea that reaches across both sides of the aisle. 3/4 of all Americans, including 66% of Republicans, back a constitutional amendment to end money as a form of free speech. When I ran in 2016 for Congress, I took Move to Amend's pledge because I believe corporations exist to serve the public welfare, not for the public to serve them. That same year, Move to Amend won a ballot initiative in my home state of Washington. Now they've passed resolutions in over 700 communities across the United States. It's time for Congress to catch up. We are supposed to be the people's house. We're proud of being the people's house, but we need to start acting like it. Big corporate money has been working against the interests of Americans for far too long. We have to restore the voice of the people in our democracy. And that starts with passing the Move to Amend resolution. Thank you for all of your support to help make that happen.